Hi, I am doing this impromptu video because I would like to help you guys out with understanding the three theoretical perspectives a little bit better. And it's really important actually that you understand the three theoretical perspectives because they're going to be used in every single one of our chapters. And within any of the larger of the three theoretical perspectives, functionalism, conflict, and symbolic interactionist, there are sub-theories that'll take a little bit of a different angle. But all theories, all of the theories that are out there, the modern theories, can be fit into one of these theories. And the other thing is that when there are sociologists that are discussing a particular topic, they will some of them will try to look at things from the various perspectives when they're doing their analysis. So the first theoretical perspective that I'm going to cover is the functionalist perspective. And so the functionalist perspective looks at what the social institutions are in a society and what the function of those institutions are. And the argument is, the assumption and the argument is going to be that these institutions are critical for the maintenance of the society. They provide some kind of critical function. So examples are the family, religion, the political system, military. In fact, I'll provide a list of the institutions. I'll put it in this module. So let's see. So going back to the functionalist perspective. Okay, so let's look at the family, for instance. Well, what's the function of the family? Well, one of the functions of the family, primary function of the family, is to socialize children so that they can know the ways of that society and be able to function in that society and be functional members, contributing members of that society. We could look at the different positions and roles of the members of a family. And so, for instance, there'll be a father, there'll be a mother, theoretically, theoretically both those exist, and say in the nuclear family. So, and they're married to each other, so they have some kind of bond or commitment, and they're working as a team, and they are sharing labor. And so maybe if we're talking about a modern nuclear family, then the father, and that's in the 1950s, we'll cover that when we get to the section on the family. The father goes out and he works, so he's the economic provider, and then the mother stays home and she takes care of the home, and she maybe does some of the stuff, definitely does the behind the scenes stuff in preparation so that he can go out and go to work. She does the cooking, she does the cleaning, she definitely does the child rearing. And I'm just going to talk about that just real briefly so I can make this video kind of short. When things, okay, so we can think about what happens if there is no family in terms of what institutions exist to replace those functions, and would they be able to adequately perform those functions to achieve the maximum, the best outcomes. And I won't tell you the answer right now. I'll leave that to the next module. When the family is dysfunctional, or any institution is dysfunctional, it is engaged, there are members that are engaged in activities that are undermining the purpose of that institution. So say, for instance, there's a member of the family that's an alcoholic. Then I presume that alcoholic is not able to maybe go to work or take care of the children, right? Or maybe there's domestic violence. So there's some kind of abuse that's going on that provides some kind of psychological scarring, right? So there's room in the functionalist perspective for talking about conflict, but they'll talk about it in terms of dysfunction, that one of the positions, or somebody in the position is, and maybe it's built into the institution, is not performing their role in the most in the best way. They're actually doing something to undermine. Let's say somebody's having an affair, right? So it undermines the trust. That would be dysfunctional. Okay, so and let's say, Emil Durkheim, and you guys need to know these three theorists. There's Emil Durkheim, Karl Marx, and Max Weber. These are the main theorists that you need to know. Emil Durkheim is a functionalist. He usually goes under the functionalist category. And religion. That's one of the things that he wrote a lot about, and he talked about the functions of religion. And so he said that, and he analyzed religions all over the world, and just like 100 and something years ago. And so he found that all religions had certain things in common, certain functions for society. So they provide an explanation of how the world works, how it's supposed to work. So if we're looking at Christianity, if we're looking at Buddhism, whatever religion we want to look at, like, there's an explanation of how we came into the world, what our purpose is, where we're going to go in the afterlife, you know. So so some of these questions, I'm going to say, like, sociology really, at least at this stage, really can't answer these things. Like, I will be able to tell you material reality, the research on that. So, and we're covering that too, right? So, or, you know, not just me, but the research, the sociological research will be able to tell you that. But at this point, we can't tell you if there's an afterlife or if we were reincarnated or anything like that. So that's beyond our scope. But what are the functions for an institution? So there's things like it welcomes new members into the community. So that would be through a baptism. Or the other thing is people's stages, or their position in their community. It sanctions that. So for instance, bar mitzvah, right, in the Jewish tradition. So now it's a boy becomes a man, or bat mitzvah, a girl becomes a woman. Or weddings, they get married, right? Two people get married. And so that's the whole community that is sanctioning, saying we see these two people now as one, as they're united. There's certain expectations for those two people, and there's going to be a kind of a support that the community provides to those two individuals. And so in the pair bonding, and so and then people will relate differently to them also. So now the guy is married, so now he's a husband. He can't date, you know, theoretically he's not supposed to date anybody else or have sex with anybody else, but he and she and the wife, the woman now who's a wife, the same thing. And so, but the expectation is that they will have sex, and they're probably going to reproduce. Those are generally the expectations. And so so people will behave differently. So you're not going to have other women trying to hit on this guy or trying to get him to be her husband, right, in monogamous type of society. When the wife gets pregnant, the assumption is that the husband is the father, and then he is going to take responsibility for providing and socializing those children. The community will also provide some support also for this institution, this important institution. So okay, so that's the functionist perspective. You know, a little bit. The conflict perspective, you guys know who Karl Marx is. He's the father of the conflict perspective. The conflict perspective says that there's oppression and exploitation. Conflict always presumes or makes that argument that there's somebody or there's some group of people that is winning at the expense of others. And so going back to religion as an example, he says He said religion is the opiate of the masses. So religion is kind of, he doesn't look at it in terms of being functional or dysfunctional. He looks at it as actually being a way to control the masses, because you're going to get, if things are unfair, don't worry about it. You're going to get your pie in the sky when it dies. And so if people are, if the elites are exploiting you, then, or religion is being used to control the masses, because an opiate kind of drugs sort of, kind of make people kind of stupid and makes people kind of complacent and not be able to affect major changes, right? Because they're kind of out of it and kind of stupid. So even if people are exploited in this world because of the structure, they're going to get their reward in the next life, which is all delusional thinking anyways, right? So that's the way that Marx would look at it. And then Max Weber, let me go back to marriage as an example too. So if marriage is an oppressive institution, well, who's getting oppressed? Feminists used to make the argument that it was, and some still do, that marriage is an institution that is oppressive to women. So men have all the power, and women are just supposed to sort of serve and obey, and they're abused in the context of the marriage. They're at least powerless. So, and men get the better end of the deal. So, and these explanations are gonna be helpful actually in explaining divorce too, because one of the things is we can test out and see to what extent, which of these theories actually holds up the best. And so, but I will save that for later too. So now back to now moving on to the next one is the symbolic interactionist perspective. The symbolic interactionist perspective asks the question, what does it mean? Let me go back and say about this. Functionist perspective asks, what's the function? The conflict asks, who benefits, but really, because students will get this confused and they'll say, and I'm not the one that came up with this. This is James Hensel, and I got to give him the credit for this. But some students will say, well, everybody benefits from the family, so it's a functionalist perspective. Yeah, if you framed it that way, then it would be a functionalist perspective. But they're not really just looking at who benefits. They're looking at who gets exploited. So I usually say who gets screwed. So who's exploited in this institution? And so that's the conflict perspective. And so in the feminist perspective, it would be that the woman is the one that's getting exploited. Now, I got to say, there has been a rise in, I don't know what they're called, but it's something, maybe it's the men's movement. I'm not sure what they call themselves, but there are men that are making arguments. I know because I've studied this stuff online, following this stuff and listening to their argument, their reasoning. And they are arguing that it's men that get exploited in marriage, and so that they're the ones that have to go out and work and provide all the resources. And they get divorced, they lose all their money. They make these really strong arguments about how powerless they are. So they're they sound like feminists, like counterpart to feminists. All right, so now moving on to the third theoretical perspective are the symbolic interactionist theorists. And so they, and who's the classic one for that? That would be Max Weber. So, and Max Weber is really interesting because when he studied religion, he actually he wrote a book called The Protestant Ethic and the Spirit of Capitalism. He makes an argument that Protestantism, Calvinism in particular, was an ideology that produced the rise of capitalism in Western nations. So it was an ideology that produced behavior that facilitated the change in an entire economic system. So this is really powerful. So if you guys ever get to read The Protestant Ethic and the Spirit of Capitalism, it's fascinating. And a very strong argument. So, but the point of the symbolic interactionist perspective is it looks at the meaning, it looks at the symbols, like it looks at the interpretation of reality from the perspective of the subjects. And so the thing about our interpretation of reality and this meaning, whatever meaning is constructed, it affects our behavior, and those in turn create the dynamics within the institution, or facilitates changes so that certain institutions emerge or sustained or are changed. Okay, so what else do you need to know? I think that's good for now. So I hope this helps. All right, bye.